Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. It is time for another true crime video yet again, and today we will be talking about the unsolved murder case of Elizabeth Short, also known as the Black Dahlia. Elizabeth Short, or Beth, was born on July 29th, 1924 in Massachusetts. She was the daughter of Cleo and Phoebe Short and was one of 5 siblings. Times were hard and life was difficult. When Beth was 5 years old, her father, Cleo, committed suicide after battling depression for some time, leaving Beth and her 4 siblings with their now single mother, who also served as their sole provider. Growing up, Beth had always dreamt of becoming an actress. She wanted to go to Hollywood and make it big, be able to provide for her family while she was following her dreams. And that is why when Beth, as a teenager, found out that her father Cleo was still actually alive, she did not get upset. Instead, she took this as an opportunity. Turns out Cleo was alive and well. He faked his suicide all those years ago as an excuse to abandon his wife and kids. He wrote Beth a letter and confessed to everything that he had done, and told her that he now lived in California and invited her to come live with him. And as I have mentioned, Beth wanted to go to Hollywood. She wanted to find success as an actress, therefore, she packed up her bags and never looked back. However, things were different now. Beth and Cleo did not get along. And according to Cleo, Beth was a freeloader. She did not have any source of income and did not help in terms of household chores or the upkeep of their home. Cleo eventually got tired of his daughter's antics and finally decided to kick her out of the house. Now, after this, Beth stayed with a few friends before settling with a man named Mark Hansen, and she lived in this house with several other women. Very similar to Hugh Hefner and the Playboy Bunny situation. Living with Mark Hansen was like living in a mini Playboy mansion. Now, this is also around the time Beth earned the nickname Black Dahlia. She was very beautiful and had extremely fair skin and always wore black. Now, during this time, she also met a man named Robert Red Manley, who was married with 2 kids, but according to Red, he and Dahlia did not have an affair and were never intimate. However, the two would often be seen together, getting dinner, drinks, and the like. On January 8th, 1947, Beth was seen being driven to the Biltmore Hotel by Red. They had dinner and drinks and checked in after as Beth was not feeling well. According to Red, he slept on the bed while Beth opted to stay on the couch. And the morning after, as Red was leaving the hotel, he saw Beth in the hotel lobby making a few calls, and this would be the last time that the Black Dahlia would ever be seen alive. A week later, on January 15th, 1947, a woman named Betty was walking with her daughter on their way to pick up their car from the repair shop when she spots what seemed to look like a mannequin laying on the ground across the street. Intrigued, Betty decided to take a look and immediately realized that this was not a mannequin at all. This was a dead body. Creeped out, she took her daughter and ran to a nearby house where they then called 911. Once the authorities arrived at the scene, people had already taken notice and were swarming the area, which they quickly cordoned off to avoid further contamination. And this scene was horrifying. This woman's naked body was pale white, placed in a very sexual manner, and was cut in half. Her mouth was slit from ear to ear, giving her a Joker's smile, and the eeriest part, she was drained off all her blood. Clearly, the person who did this knew what they were doing. Now, she was believed to have been killed somewhere else and was just dumped on the side of the road for someone to discover. And The authorities then took her body for postmortem examinations, but found no DNA on her, so the police had no idea where to begin their search. Fingerprint test results came out, and this was confirmed to be Elizabeth Short, the Black Dahlia. She was only 22 years old. Now, law enforcement tried to reach out to Beth's father, Cleo. However, he refused to get involved. So instead, they tried reaching out to her mother instead. Now, when Phoebe answered this call, the other person on the line pretended to be a reporter, saying that Beth had won a beauty pageant and that he needed information as he was writing a piece on her. And at first, Phoebe was excited. She was so happy that her daughter was finally starting to get her name out there. However, before this call ended, the person who called admitted that none of this was true and that he only wanted to get information on Beth because she was found dead and brutally murdered. On January 24th, 9 days after the discovery of Beth's body, a letter along with her personal things were sent to the police station. This letter was made up of magazine cuttings and was doused in gasoline to make sure that there was no DNA evidence left to point out to who the sender was. Now, there was, however, a short handwritten letter that came with it, saying that this was from the Black Dahlia's avenger. Along with the letters were some photos that belonged to Beth, her birth certificate, her social security number, and a phone book. Now, as I have mentioned, this is an unsolved case. Up until now, no one knows who did this, and nobody was ever put to justice for Elizabeth Short's murder. But there are, however, a few suspects. Of course, the first one would be Robert Red Manley, the person last seen with Beth when she was still alive. And although it was proven that Red was all the way in San Diego at the time of Elizabeth's passing, and that he passed a polygraph test, people still believed that it was him who had done it. He was eventually cleared as a suspect, but the pressure from the public caused him so much stress that his wife actually had to put him in a mental institution. The second suspect is a man named Joseph Dumas, who confessed to taking Beth's life a few days after she and him went out for drinks. However, this was a false confession, as the authorities were able to confirm that at the time of the murder, Joseph was actually in a military base. The third and final suspect is a guy named George Hodel. I don't think he was a suspect at the time, but his son Steve highly believes that it was his father who murdered the Black Dahlia. According to Steve, George would have been able to do so as he had attended medical school, so he knew how to do those things like draining the blood and stuff. He also apparently had a secret room in the house where no one else was allowed access to. So that's pretty sketchy. George Hodel also had photos of a woman who looked strikingly similar to the Black Dahlia. And experts are 95% sure that this is her in the photos. A handwriting comparison between George and the person who sent the letters to the police station all those decades ago were also done, and as you can see, they look almost identical. Before his death, George was yet again suspected for another murder. Authorities were keeping an eye out for him and installed recording devices in his home. And one time he was heard saying, "Supposing I did kill the Black Dahlia, they couldn't prove it now. They can't talk to my secretary anymore because she's dead." Law enforcement also worked with Steve to try and find some answers, even bringing cadaver dogs to George's secret room. Now, these dogs were able to catch a scent of multiple dead people everywhere in the room. However, I don't think a lot really came off of that. But then again, if George Hodel really was responsible for Beth's death and was able to remove any traces that would link him to the crime, It wouldn't be that difficult for him to clean up a room, would it? And yeah, that's pretty much all that I have for you guys for today's video. I know this was a short one, but as usual, I would really love to hear your thoughts on this case. Who do you think did it? Personally, I'm pretty sold on George. Aside from the incriminating evidence presented by his own son, I think it's quite strange that he had photos of Beth and incriminated himself more with some of the things he was heard saying in the recordings. But that is just my 2 cents, so please let me know your thoughts. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I will see you guys on my next video.